Good morning, friends and enemies. In today's video, we are going game by game for every NFL game on the slate, week 12, and we are ranking every fantasy relevant running back as a start, a sit, or a flex, as we do every single Wednesday. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. We'll be doing the same exact thing for the wide receiver position tomorrow. Let's jump straight in. We'll start things off with Thursday Night Football. We've got Buffalo at Houston. Houston, 6-point underdogs here, 43.5-point total. This will be another CJ Stroud-less game for the Texans. We're not going to overthink James Cook here. He's going straight into the must-start category, though. It is a tough matchup, so he'll probably end up closer towards the bottom of that tier. But nonetheless, you are not sitting James Cook because we know he's capable of on a good day. Now, the interesting backfield on the other side is Houston, where we've seen Woody Marks pretty much completely take over the backfield. He's getting a ton of volume. He's getting a ton of touches. And if there's one part of the Buffalo defense that could be had that Houston can absolutely figure out what they want to do with, is the run defense here. They are allowing the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position, bottom 4 in EPA per rush allowed to opponents as well. So a pretty green matchup, at least on paper. I'm a little bit worried that Buffalo kind of just beats up on Houston enough to the point where it's like, yeah, on paper, the matchup looks great. But as you can see, Vegas has a very, very high projection for Woody Marks here. 63.5 rushing yards, 12.5 receiving yards. Anytime touchdown is at plus 120. I actually really like Woody Marks' reception line here at 1.5, so I will be nailing the over there. If you want to follow all of my picks, by the way, just a little caveat here, I take a ton of player props throughout the season. I've actually officially tracked everything that I've taken, and I'm over 75% hit rate on individual legs on player props for the year, which is incredibly impressive, to be honest with you. That's much higher than I would normally do, but I'm reading the board pretty well. Woody Marks over 1.5 reception feels quite free. And if you want to follow all of my picks, if you want to see everything that I take, you could do so on the Pickett app. It is free to download. It is free to follow me. It's like a social betting platform pretty much that you can like follow your friends. You can follow your favorite creators, and it syncs all of our picks. And obviously, if you sync one of your books or any of the books that you play on, it will be able to track your picks throughout the calendar months and weeks and years. And you can see how well you're doing, how poorly you're doing. More importantly, you could just see how we're doing on the year so far. So go to the Pickett app, use BDGE when you download it. Again, free. There's no like credit card required or anything like that. You will follow myself as well as the other BDGE members on the platform. That link will be down below. So for Woody Marks, I think Vegas is telling him it's going to be a good day for him. He's been playing pretty well, at least having a ton of volume with Davis Mills. So we're going to throw him into the feels good category. Good matchup on paper. A lot of volume here. Besides him, we got Nick Chubb. He's going to go into the rather not category. He's just been kind of completely phased out of the offense. Moving over to Indy at the Kansas City Chiefs. So we've got a 3.5-point underdog game for the Colts. 50.5-point total. Of course, JT is going into the must-start category. On the flip side, we don't have word yet on Pacheco. He has missed the last 2 games, including missing the bye week. And I think a lot of people expect him to be back for this game, but we don't have practice reports yet, so I wouldn't say that that's a guarantee. The sprain that he dealt with in his knee is something that typically takes 2 to 4 weeks to heal, so he very much could still miss this game. If he does miss this game, I think I feel okay about Kareem Hunt in my flex spot because he's scoring touchdowns. He's getting the majority of volume. Rashard Smith is really not getting anything in his gullet there going that way, so Kareem Hunt would be a dub flex for me. I think he's almost like guaranteed a touchdown. As you can see, his line is minus 115 for an anytime touchdown score. He did it against Denver, a much tougher defense to run the ball against. So yeah, I like Kareem Hunt. If Pacheco returns, it makes that backfield extremely difficult to figure out, and they would both move into the shaky flex category. And when they're splitting work, it's impossible to not just flip a coin on who's going to end up scoring the touchdown if either of them are going to get more than 10 touches. So without Pacheco, kind of like Hunt. With Pacheco, don't like either of them. Next game up, we've got Minnesota at Green Bay, a little NFC North division game here. The Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs on the road in Lambeau, 40.5-point total. Green Bay's got a very, very stout run defense. That being said, Aaron Jones is really taken over as the 1A, and he looks really, really good on the ground. He's very involved in the offense. What the offense is going to look like is pretty much the problem here with Minnesota and J.J. McCarthy, whether or not he can sustain drives, etc. So we're going to go Aaron Jones in the dub flex category because he's been very efficient. He's very, very involved. So I think, whether or not he has a ceiling game, probably unlikely, but I still think he's likely to get you somewhere in that like dub flex range of, 10 to 12, 13, 14 points in PPR. And of course, any of these guys who end up in the dub flex range, if they score the touchdown, they're probably going to be in that 15 to 18 range, which is very welcome to our fantasy teams. On the other side, we don't have word on Josh Jacobs yet. They said there is a chance that he suits up in week 12 against the Vikings. So if he does, obviously he's going into your lineup. He's pretty much a must start, though he probably will be a little bit limited. Unfortunately, if you got Jacobs and he's active, like there's no way that you sit him. Let's talk through if we don't have Josh Jacobs in the lineup. That gives Emmanuel Wilson a near bell cow role. I will say, not like a super easy matchup against Minnesota. And I saw a couple reports from beats out in Green Bay that were saying, like, yes, everyone's expecting Emmanuel Wilson to be the guy, and he'll probably get a very large majority of touches. But Chris Brooks is the preferred pass blocking back there. And Chris Brooks is like 230 pounds. He's like almost a fullback. And the way that Minnesota blitzes at such a high volume and just the unique defense that Brian Flores has, there's a chance that Chris Brooks actually plays a little bit more than expected. But that being said, if Josh Jacobs is out, I do expect Emmanuel Wilson to have a 15-plus touch workload here. He should catch passes. He should get goal line work if they get down there. And as we've seen over the last 2 years, the workhorse role in the Green Bay backfield is super, super fantasy friendly. So don't want to overthink that. Emmanuel Wilson is going to go into the feels good category. And then Jordan Mason, I mean, despite the touchdown run last week, he's a rather not, and Chris Brooks would be a rather not too. So we will move on to New England at Cincinnati. We've got New England as 8.5-point favorites, even being on the road, 50.5-point total because Cincinnati's defense is so bad and New England's offense is playing really well. Now, obviously, Travion Henderson has been playing lights out the last couple of weeks while Ramondre Stevenson has been out, though he is expected to return to practice today and likely suit up for this incoming game, which makes this really tricky because you want to just lean into the fact that, okay, Travion's playing so well, of course, he's going to continue being like the workhorse in this offense. And I do think there's a chance that happens given that Ramondre Stevenson's coming off of a multi-week injury, this turf toe, and maybe they don't just like force him back into that early down role. I would be very surprised if over the remainder of the season, Ramondre Stevenson doesn't recapture at least like 60 to 70% of that early down role, because that's just the way that they want to run this offense, right? They've had that type of, Josh McDaniels' offense is typically a running back by committee offense where they use one bruiser up front, a guy that gets a decent amount of goal line carries, a guy that gets most of the first and second down work with a dude like Travion Henderson, who's also explosive and, brings his own juice to the offense. That being said, I feel good about starting Travion Henderson this week because the matchup is so good against the Cincinnati Bengals. As you could see, most fantasy points allowed to the running back position, most points allowed to overall offenses on the other side of things. So we'll have to wait for word. Obviously, if Ramondre Stevenson does not suit up, Travion Henderson, of course, is, top 10, top 8, top 5 fantasy running back this week, goes right into the must-start category. If Ramondre Stevenson returns, as you could tell, I have some hesitation towards what the role exchange is going to be here. Like you already see Ramondre Stevenson's anytime touchdown line is at -170, and we don't even know if he's suiting up. Travion's is at -190. This should be a very, very running back heavy dosage game. So I would put Travion Henderson in the feels good category, and I would put Ramondre Stevenson honestly in the dub flex category, because I also think there's a chance if Ramondre is active, if Ramondre is healthy, he's the starter again, that he comes in and he's immediately getting more carries than Travion Henderson. And I think Henderson's definitely earned more work overall in this offense, right? They see the explosiveness as something you can't put back in the bottle once the lid is already off, once the cap is already off. But I do still think that they value that type of power running from Ramondre Stevenson, and it's what they forced the beginning of the year for the first, 10 weeks or so, 9 weeks or so before getting hurt. But it's just the reality of the situation, unfortunately. Chase Brown on the other side of things, like New England's run defense has been awesome. They will be without Milton Williams in the interior of that defensive line, who, he's a big boy and he's very impactful in there. Regardless, they still have a very good run defense, and Chase Brown has obviously played, exponentially better with Joe Flacco under center there. Jamar Chase is going to be out for this game. Chase Brown, I think the biggest takeaway is that since Samaje Perine has been out with his high ankle sprain, Chase Brown is averaging 10.5 targets per game. Like, he is so unbelievably involved in the passing game. The game script is super in favor of the passing game for the Bengals. I think they're going to struggle without Jamar Chase. Like, I think New England's not going to have very much trouble locking down this passing offense, because really all you have to do now is focus on T. Higgins, and they don't have much else going on there. So I could see Chase Brown finishing this game with 5, 6, 7, 8 checkdowns, to be honest with you. Whatever his reception line is, it's probably going to be set around 4.5. I'd probably be okay taking the over there. Probably won't be very efficient on the ground, but he has been running better. The offensive line is playing a bit better. So overall, like, I look at the two tiers, I feel much better about Chase Brown in the feels good tier than I do in the dub flex tier. So I think just based on how he's playing, based on no Jamar Chase, the receptions and all that kind of stuff, I feel relatively good about Chase Brown and what he's doing right now. Moving to New York at Detroit. Detroit 10-point favorites, 50.5-point total. Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, is going right into the must-start category. With Dan Campbell calling the plays, Jahmyr Gibbs is just so active. He's so good, especially in the passing game. David Montgomery, based on matchup, based on game script, throw him in the dub flex category. He's kind of like Kareem Hunt, maybe a little bit of a better version right now where, you probably need a touchdown in order to come through, but I do think there will be a lot of running back touches overall in this game going against the Giants. Detroit, they never play back-to-back bad games for the most part at this point in their tenure of who they are as the Detroit Lions. Anytime they lose a game, the next game, they are typically right back into the swing of things. So I expect a decent game for David Montgomery, dub flex, in my opinion. On the other side of the ball, we got Devin Singletary coming off of his multi-touchdown game. We've got a big game from Tyron Tracy last week as well. A lot of yards, a lot of touches. However, they're playing the Detroit Lions right now, who have allowed the single fewest fantasy points to the running back position. If Singletary does not score a touchdown, he's not going to be a great start for you. So he's going to go into the shaky flex category. And I do think you probably got to put Tyron Tracy there too. Like I know we're going to be overhyped about what happened last week, the yardage, the touchdowns, but the matchup is really tough. They do get Jackson Dart back, which is good, but we've seen a lot of floor games out of this running back duo here since Cam Scatabo has gone out. So I would probably look elsewhere if I could here. We got the Jets at the Baltimore Ravens here. The Ravens are 13.5-point favorites, 44.5-point total in this game. The Ravens are en route to make an unbelievable comeback and make the playoffs here. Derrick Henry going to go right into the must-start category against this horrid Jets defense. The other side of the ball is a little bit tougher to figure out because we got Tyrod starting. We've got no Garrett Wilson. But Baltimore's playing a lot better on defense than they had in the beginning of the year with all their players back and healthy. Vegas right now has Breece Hall at 66.5 rushing yards, 13.5 receiving yards. I kind of like the over on that receiving yardage total because with Garrett Wilson out, the last time Tyrod Taylor played with Breece Hall, he had a pretty significant chunk of receiving yards in that one, if I am not mistaken. But yeah, I think Breece Hall, I think the matchup is not as good on paper as what these numbers will tell you based on, again, the first 6 weeks or so of the season, the games without Lamar, the games with all the injured defensive players for Baltimore here. So I actually think efficiency-wise, Breece Hall is going to struggle a little bit, but I think overall volume, he'll get there. And there's nobody else in this game that I want to play. Keaton Mitchell getting a lot of hype because of one fucking game. Isaiah Davis, no. Let's move on. Pittsburgh at Chicago. So we've got Pittsburgh as 3-point underdogs here, 44.5-point total. We don't have any word on the quarterback situation out here for Pittsburgh, whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to play with that fractured left wrist here. Jalen Warren, I'm going to assume he's playing. We don't have practice reports there. He tweaked his ankle last week, but I think it was minor, and I do believe he will end up playing. This is a good matchup against the Chicago Bears, so he's going to go into the feels good category. And I know Kenneth Gainwell is coming off of a good game, obviously, but he really only does that when Jalen Warren is not playing, so he's going to go into the shaky flex category. I think he'll get a decent amount of work, but not overly enthused about him. DeAndre Swift coming off of a 21 carry game. Minnesota really shut him down in terms of explosives and, didn't get into the end zone there. But overall, I do like the matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are bottom 7 in EPA per rush allowed to opponents here. I do think their defense definitely looks a little bit better, but I still think running backs can have successful days against them. And Swift's volume has just been really, really good. Him and Kyle Monangai kind of splitting that backfield 2/3 to 1/3 right now. So I trust Swift. He's been pretty good all year, usually involved in the passing game a little bit more than he was last week. He also hasn't scored a touchdown in 2 games, which feels like he's a little bit due. So DeAndre Swift is going to be in that, feels good category for me. I feel pretty good about having him in my RB2 or flex spot. Monangai is a guy that right now, based on his volume, needs a touchdown to really come through for you. So he's going to go into the shaky flex category. Seattle at Tennessee. So we've got Seattle's 13.5-point favorites, a 40.5-point total. So right now, based on the splits in the backfield, the Titans running backs are guys that I just do not want in my lineup. The other side of things gets a little bit tricky because we had Walker come out and have a pretty big day. If you look at the rushing numbers, it really wasn't that much different than 4 or 5 different games that he's had. He did get the rushing touchdown and he had a little bit more work in the receiving game. This is a game, though, that they should dominate the Tennessee Titans here, right? The Titans are terrible. They don't want to tackle players. They do have Jeffrey Simmons back, which is a little bit tougher to run against, but I expect Seattle to dominate the run script here. I expect them to dominate this game. And I think between Walker and Zach Charbonnet, we should see upwards of 30 carries here. So Walker against Tennessee, based on what Mike McDonald said this previous week, talking about how Kenneth Walker should get more and more involved, kind of at like a I'll believe it when I see it standpoint for him. But overall, I do think I feel pretty good if I have Kenneth Walker coming off of last week and more so the matchup here. So Walker's that for me. Charbonnet, he kind of again fits into that like Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery, not anywhere near as efficient as Kenneth Walker. But again, like you could see the splits, rushing yards for Kenneth Walker is set at 58.5. Zach Charbonnet down at 38.5. So there's a huge discrepancy between the way Vegas sees him clearly here. So I'm going to put Charbonnet into that like dub flex category here for you. And it feels like Aaron Jones is a tier ahead of these guys. So he's definitely at the top of it. But again, matchup. These guys have great matchups, should score touchdowns where Jones has the tougher matchup of the group. But yeah, I'll throw him in there. Moving into the 4 o'clock slates, we got Cleveland at the Raiders here. Cleveland 3.5 point underdogs. We've got Shedeur Sanders starting in this one. There is just not a number high enough to say for Quinshon Judkins carries. Unfortunately, though, they don't expect him to have a very efficient game. 67.5 rushing yards here. Kind of a fall from grace, unfortunately. We haven't had a lot of big games from Judkins lately because of the offensive lack of prowess there. Overall, though, I just think with the volume that he's going to get, I think I put him into the feels good category still. Ashton Genty on the other side of things gets the Browns run defense, which has been so good. They did just get run over by Derrick Henry to a pretty high level, but overall they've been a very good run defense, and the Raiders offense just does not look good right now. His line set at 57.5. He's pretty involved in the receiving game. So I don't know that I want to put him into the dub flex category. I'll probably throw him into the feels good still, but this game is going to be dreadful to watch. If you've got Genty or Judkins, I would just look at the box score afterwards. Genty's definitely going to be closer to a low-end RB2, though, than someone that I'm like, yeah, top 12 guy, feel good as an RB1. The offensive line is just it's just such a mismatch in this game between the Raiders offensive line and the Cleveland defensive line. So I think Geno Smith might get sacked 42 times by Myles Garrett. Jacksonville at Arizona. All right. So we've got Jacksonville as 3-point favorites in this one, 47.5 point total. A little bit tough to get a read on, honestly, both of these backfields right now, with Bashaw Tutin out carrying Etienne before Tutin got hurt with the ankle sprain. Again, I've kind of been on record here. I don't feel like that was like a very clear changing of the guard. I still think this is going to be more of like a hot hand approach. And would it surprise me if Tutin out carried Etienne in a few of the games going forward? Not really, but predicting when that's going to happen is going to be a bit tough. Vegas still likes Travis Etienne in this matchup quite a bit. 60.5 rushing yards, 14.5 receiving yards. So he's going to go into the feels good category. I think you can flex Bashaw Tutin, but I'm really still a bit worried about his overall role and involvement in this offense to, I guess, a degree that like the sentiment in the community has been this week. So I think I would still put him more in the shaky flex category. Like I don't really see a huge difference between like Tyrone Tracy and Bashaw Tutin. I like him above these other guys because I think they have very low floors. But overall, it's not like I feel confident about having Tutin in my lineup. On the flip side, maybe Trey Benson returns to practice today. Maybe he doesn't. I really don't know. In his absence, Zonovan Knight has been like the guy, but this is a tough matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars run defense, and it's kind of like a split backfield here. Amari DiMercato running the obvious passing down situations. Michael Carter involved a little bit in the passing down, so I think Zonovan Knight will probably get 10 to 12 carries. Will get goal line work if they get down there, but overall, he fits somewhere in the like dub flex or shaky flex category, probably closer to the shaky flex category, and I'll put him a little bit higher. If Trey Benson does return, I like him a little bit. Like I do think he's going to be the guy there. I think he'll lose obvious passing downs to Amari DiMercato. Unfortunately, if he didn't get hurt, he might have played a very large role in this offense, but I don't think we're ever really going to know. First game back from a very long injury stint. Tough matchup against the Jaguars. Wouldn't be like overly optimistic about getting him into my lineup. He would be in the shaky flex here, but definitely at the top of it if he was active for this one. Atlanta at New Orleans. We've got Atlanta as 1.5 point underdogs. Kirk Cousins starting at running back. Bijan's going right into the must-start tier. We got Kamara coming off of like his best game prior to the bye against Atlanta here, and Atlanta's been shredded by running backs as of recently. So matchup volume, I'm going to throw Alvin Kamara into the feels good tier here, and he's a pretty good low-end RB2. In my opinion, Tyler Algier will be in the shaky flex category. For me, Philadelphia at Dallas. All right, let's see if Saquon Barkley can get his life going a little bit here in the second half now that the matchups get a lot cleaner for him. He's going to go into the must-start category. We do have Philly as 3-point favorites on the road in Dallas, 47.5 point total. Now, Javonte had a really good week 1 against Philly, but again, that was the game that Jalen Carter spit on the Dallas player and ended up getting taken out of the game, which opened up things for their defense. Javonte Williams still getting as many carries as he did in week 1. So I still feel good about him. I still think he gets a ton of volume and is a good chance to get into the end zone, as you could see, minus 110 for an anytime touchdown, and kind of leave that game at that. Tampa Bay at the LA Rams. The Rams, 6.5-point favorites at home, 49.5-point total. Kyren Williams, I feel good about. He's just played really well. Still splitting work with Blake Corum, but clearly the more trusted, more efficient back. Blake Corum will be a shaky flex. On the other side, we don't know about Bucky Irving's status. We haven't had practice reports yet for him. This is an incredibly difficult matchup for Bucs running backs against the Rams, as you can see, just red across the board here. Bottom 4 in fantasy points allowed, bottom 4 in EPA per rush allowed, bottom 2, 31st overall in points per game allowed to opposing offenses. So given that Bucky returned to practice last week, I expect him to practice this week, but I still think it's very much up in the air whether or not he plays. If I had to put my money on it, I would say 51-49 that he does not end up suiting up against the Rams this weekend, which leaves the backfield open between Sean Tucker and Rachaad White. And we saw a little bit of like a flip in how the backfield usage worked last week in favor of Sean Tucker. Had, 135 from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns. So a massive spike game here. And he took basically the majority of the early down carries, 19 carries in this one. Rachaad White still ended up playing more snaps because he's the passing down back here. So I think that's going to be the similar role. Sean Tucker is a very tough evaluation given the matchup here, and we don't know how the game script is going to work. He should get the majority of carries. What I do know is Rachaad White goes into the shaky flex tier because he's simply not going to have efficiency on the ground, and unless he catches like 7 passes for 50 yards and scores a touchdown, he's going to be a little bit of a tough start for you. Sean Tucker, I think based on last week, if Bucky Irving is out, his efficiency, the way that they chose to ride him, I think I'm going to throw him at the bottom of the dub flex tier. I don't feel great about him. I think he'll probably be ranked somewhere in that like RB 25 to 30 range for me. My rankings are going to be live by the time you guys watch this on BDGE.co. So you can sign up for the Big Dog membership there so you can see where I end up putting my rankings. But again, Vegas has him anytime touchdown prop at plus 180. So if you look around this tier, you got Ramondre at minus 170. Big flip based on the matchup there. So while it was good to see Tucker kind of explode last week, this is not the follow-up matchup that we'd like to have. If he was playing against the Bengals, he might be in like top of the feels good category, but just can't do it though. Carolina at San Francisco is Monday Night Football. We've got San Fran as 7-point favorites here, 48.5-point total. Rico Dowdle keeps getting, he gets a ton of work, obviously. He dominates the backfield script. His yards per carry numbers, efficiency numbers have kind of plummeted the last couple of weeks. I think a little bit of that is just the defense is probably, showing out to stop Rico Dowdle and allowing Bryce Young to have to beat them there. But Vegas still believes that he is a really good bet to have a monster game, 78.5 rushing yards, 17.5 receiving yards, minus 125 to score a touchdown. Obviously, C-Max going into the must-start category. Listen, if you have Rico Dowdle, based on the fact that the guy is playing on like 80% of the snaps, there's no way you sit him. And I look around here, like I'm starting him over Woody, I'm starting him over Emmanuel, I'm starting him over all these guys, like maybe not Travion Henderson if Ramondre Stevenson is out, but again, that's kind of a stretch. So I'm going to throw Rico Dowdle into the bottom of the must-start category. He'll end up being probably my RB 9, 10, 11 in that range this week. The matchup is pretty good. Like San Francisco's defense is not good, especially not against the run. They are bottom half in terms of fantasy points, EPA, all that kind of stuff. And then anyone besides those guys, like, yeah, you don't want to start anyone else in this game. So I believe that will wrap up the running back rankings for week 12. Let me put it in poster mode so you guys could see everybody all at once. There you go. There you have it. And again, if you want to follow all my picks, that is on the Pick'It app. The link will be right down below. Make sure you use code BDGE when you do download it. It lets them know that we sent you, and it'll automatically take you to our profile to follow us over there. All right. And you can easily just copy bets that we take. Like that's a feature on the app, which is really, really cool. And if you want the rankings, again, BDGE.co, become a Big Dog member. Subscribe to the channel if you want the same video tomorrow for the wide receivers. We'll have a lot more practice reports, injury reports, and other data like that. So it'll be an even better video for y'all. Good luck in week 12. If you don't watch the wide receiver video, very disrespectful. Either way, you're still getting a smoochie from me. Mwah.